You could go ahead and build your own coding and mapping notification system, but it takes time and it sucks. Alternately, consider Courier, who's sponsoring this episode. They make it easy. You can call a single send API for all of your notifications and channels. You can control the complexity around routing, retries, and deliverability, and simplify your notification sequences with automation rules. Visit courier.com today and get started for free. If you wind up talking to them, tell them that I sent you and watch them wince, because everyone does when you bring up my name. That's the glorious part of being me. Once again, you could build your own notification system, but why on God's flat earth would you do that? Visit courier.com today to learn more. Good morning, AWS, and welcome to the AWS Morning Brief. I'm cloud economist Corey Quinn, and you've already heard this part. Right. Before we dive in, I just want to congratulate my friend and colleague, Caroline, on getting married last week. Now my employees are reporting lower engagement. In seriousness, she's the person that handles media sponsorship sales here at the Duckbill Group, and without her, I wouldn't be able to afford basically anything, including the caffeine that powers all of my nonsense. Thanks to her, congratulations, and if you enjoy this sort of ridiculousness, consider visiting requinvent.com, where we're putting together the bones of what I'm going to be doing at reInvent this year. Requinvent, it's like reInvent, only good. Now, what happened last week in AWS? In the works, AWS region in New Zealand. What tomfoolery is this? New Zealand, like Narnia, is clearly not a real place. I suppose this new region will be great for the folks who need to migrate workloads from their data centers in Old Zealand. Relatedly, AWS Economic Impact Study, AWS investment in New Zealand, and at last we have numbers. The New Zealand AWS region will cost roughly $5.3 billion to build and operate for the first 15 years. I've been saying for a while, and getting yelled at for it, that AWS regions almost certainly cost multiple billions each. Now we have proof. Amazon CloudWatch request metrics for Amazon S3 access points now available. This might be the first time we're figuring out which application is hammering S3 with requests. Could become straightforward. After you become aware that it's a problem in the first place. Amazon Detective supports S3 and DNS finding types, adds finding details. This is going to be awesome. No, not for customers, for Detective's revenues. Suddenly it has an excuse to ingest a lot more data than it did before. This starts at $2 per gigabyte. Amazon DynamoDB now provides you more granular control of audit logging by enabling you to filter streams data plane API activity in AWS CloudTrail. Eventually, every AWS service team discovers that the party is winding down, and they have to introduce features to let customers opt out of being billed for certain things. Amazon EC2 Fleet Instant Mode now supports targeted Amazon EC2 on-demand capacity reservations. I give up. I have read this post 3 times, start to finish, and I have no idea what the hell it's trying to tell me. Help? Amazon Lex announces utterances statistics for bots built using Lex v2 console and API. Why would you bother to define utterance in this context or give an example of when you might care about statistics surrounding them? I'm starting to realize that an awful lot of my I don't get it responses to AWS releases aren't because I'm bad at understanding things. Announcing general availability of tracing support in AWS distro for OpenTelemetry. This is interesting, but I'm definitely going to wait for someone to glue all the parts together into a service I can buy that lets me see what all of my Lambdas function are doing. AWS GroundStation announces licensing accelerator. Though they'd never thought about it before, for some reason, space suddenly has Oracle's complete and undivided attention. AWS RoboMaker now supports container images in simulation. Super happy that this came out last week. It was the missing 34th way to run containers in AWS that finished up my second 17 ways to run containers in AWS blog post series. AWS site-to-site VPN releases updated download configuration utility. Look, This won't mean much to most of you, but I remember the bad old days where the way we configured devices for site-to-site VPNs was guess and freaking check. This is basically magic to me. Just let me have this one. AWS WAF now offers inline regular expressions. If you finally learned to read WAF rules, AWS now has a feature destined to fix your little red wagon. Know before you go, virtually. A guide to AWS at VMworld 2021. Why on earth am I not finding out about this via a personalized invitation from VMware itself? It's almost like they don't want me to live tweet the keynote or something. Build your own game day to support operational resilience. I have no idea why I've never heard of Build Your Own Game Day before, but it's almost certainly going to be the best holiday ever. Detect adversary behavior in seconds with CrowdStrike and Amazon EventBridge. This is a far cry from CloudTrail's detect adversary behavior in tens of minutes, and the AWS Bill's detect adversary behavior in 3 to 5 days. Of course, it requires a third party to do this. Optimizing your AWS infrastructure for sustainability, Part 2, Storage. This post is, to be blunt, ridiculous. For some overwhelming majority of AWS's customers, following all of the guidance in this post will result in no measurable climate benefit whatsoever. Customers will, however, read this and spend months implementing those things. On balance, everything that it suggests also results in lower cloud bills, so I suppose I'll take it. This episode is sponsored in part by our friends at Chaos Search. You could run Elasticsearch or Elastic Cloud or OpenSearch as they're calling it now, or a self-hosted Elk stack. But why? Chaos Search gives you the same API you've come to know and tolerate, along with unlimited data retention and no data movement. Just throw your data into S3 and proceed from there as you would expect. This is great for IT operations folks, for app performance monitoring, cybersecurity. If you're using Elasticsearch, consider not running Elasticsearch. They're also available now in the AWS Marketplace if you'd prefer not to go direct and have half of whatever you pay them count toward your EDP commitment. Discover what companies like Klarna, Equifax, Armor Security, and Blackboard already have. To learn more, visit chaossearch.io and tell them I sent you just so you can see them facepalm yet again. What to consider when selecting a region for your workloads. I was all set up to dunk on this for not including the things that actually matter, but this post hits almost all of them. It touches on cost, which is the elephant in the room. It obviously nails data residency requirements. Latency is sure, whatever. And then there's, does this region have the service you want? Honestly, I bias for US West 2 myself for 2 reasons. 1, it almost always gets new features and services in the first wave. And 2, it's close enough to where I dwell in San Francisco that the latency isn't really a concern when I'm typing into a terminal remotely. The fact that at last check it was one of the green regions is a nice bonus as well. Amazon QuickSight Q, business intelligence using natural language questions. It went generally available this week. I often joke that Amazon Aurora set up an AWS service naming theme around Disney princesses. AWS clearly didn't find that joke as funny as I did and launched a service that's instead named after a character from Star Trek: The Next Generation. AWS Cloud Builders, career transformation and personal growth. I love this. More stories like this one, please. One highlighted builder, Veliswa Boya, was a guest author and host of this podcast when I was out on parental leave last year, and she is just fantastic. Scaling ad verification with machine learning and AWS Inferentia. Ad verification, meaning does it comply with seemingly arbitrary Amazon requirements, is probably the most Amazonian thing I saw last week. Just a reminder that Amazon advertising may throw off money, but it's also the single biggest erosion of customer trust in Amazon's 27-year history. I no longer trust Amazon's search results, and that's no small thing. This example that they give in this blog post does absolutely nothing to alter that. Trigger notifications on time series data with Amazon TimeStream. This has very strong rebuilding CloudWatch from first principles energy to it. How airports can innovate by obsessing over passenger experience. This entire post talking about airports, never once acknowledging the existence of airport lounges, means that it complies with Amazon's employee travel policy. Integrating Amazon Location Service with AWS AI ML services. Unfortunately, it seems that Amazon Location Service lost an interdepartmental war, as so many others have, and have been forced to shore up the machine learning narrative. A moment of silence for the fallen, if you please. Implementing a cross-account and cross-region AWS config status dashboard. One would think that this is exactly the sort of thing that one would be gaining for free by virtue of paying a cloud vendor. One would be gravely mistaken, apparently. Solving the traveling salesperson problem with deep reinforcement learning on Amazon SageMaker. The real answer to the traveling salesperson problem was pay AWS an extortionate pile of money the entire time. How to make the most of your AWS Summit Washington, D.C. experience. I'm told try not to catch COVID-19 and die is remarkably popular as well. And finally, new research quantifies the value of AWS training and certification for AWS partners. I'm sure there's something less credible than a research study that AWS themselves have commissioned, but I can't for the life of me imagine what that might be. And that's what happened last week in AWS. I'm cloud economist Corey Quinn. I'll talk to you later this week.
This has been a Humble Pod production. Stay humble.